this. What's happening there? Well, I can tell you what's happening there. It means that the cam on the bottom of that film advance shaft it's riveted to the shaft at this point, and it's not firm, so that this is sometimes tipping at one angle and sometimes tipping at another and causing it to jam. So that's our problem. It's the film advance shaft there, I think, and it's the fact that the film advance shaft is not fixed firmly. That's interesting because I looked at that earlier and it appeared to me that it was fine. Obviously, that was not the case. So that film advance shaft will have to come out, be given a bit of attention. Hopefully I'll be able to reuse it. That'll probably explain the erratic nature of it, how sometimes it works absolutely perfectly fine and then at other times, every time it fails to work. And that'll be down to the fact that that cam would be sitting at a different angle and so would be catching on something probably at one extreme or the other. So I've got everything off the top. Let's put this rubber band over here to hold the top cover in place. And now I'll have to remove the film advance down here. Just need to uncover the screws. That shaft will probably come out. There it is. Just recover the screws. Yeah, I'm not surprised I missed that because it's not loose enough to easily pick what's going on there. Yeah, I can see the wiggle there, but it's not pronounced, and at any other point in any other direction it doesn't wiggle at all. Alright, this will require some hammer and punch work to see if I can get that riveted back firmly, and we'll see how this thing works after that. Well, my bench block here doesn't have a hole of a suitable size to hold this shaft firmly. I'd want something under the end of the shaft, ideally. I don't want it just binding up on the side. I've got a piece of a stoking set here that seems to work quite nicely, and I'm just going to go around here and tap that gently in sequence and hopefully rivet that back on. All I need to do is spread that rivet really. You've got to be cautious doing this. These shafts are quite soft, they will bend. There doesn't appear to be any movement there now. I'm checking this to see if it's square with the shaft. It's a bit high on that side. All I can do is put that back in and see what I get. The other thing I was concerned about, well, you can't really see it here now because of the grease, but this spring has bitten into the shaft right there, and I was concerned that the last coil of the spring might be binding in there in some fashion, causing me trouble. Okay, so let's pop this back in place. And normally I'd start this in the neutral position, which is there, and then wind a full turn of tension onto it, but in this case that spring is very tired, so I'm going to give it a third of a turn more tension, which incidentally is what you would do for a Retina Reflex S, Retina Reflex or a Retina 3S camera. You'd give them more tension there. That's lined up, but it's not lined up at the top, is it? That's better. Okay. I'll get my 3 screws in place. This will be very frustrating because it's a fault that didn't appear every time. I'm sure it occurred to someone to ask, well, why don't I just replace the shaft? And the answer to that is simply because I do not have a large number of replacement shafts that I can just magic into existence whenever I want to. Most of my parts have come from parts cameras, and parts cameras have usually been condemned for one good reason or another. What's that catching on? There's nothing catching there. I'll just get that round to the neutral position. one of those screw heads sticking up. Yeah, I think so. That's better. Get this on frame number 1 so that that shaft will come up and lock it. That's better. It'll just hold that film advance shaft while I get that third screw in place. Okay, so all 3 screws done up tight. Yeah, it was one of those screw heads wasn't done up tight and it was catching the shaft as it came around. That's just while I've been reassembling it. All 3 screws are in place. I'll tension the film advance, put the base plate back on the camera, put the advance shaft on there and see if I can provoke that fault. So one full turn of tension, drop that lock lever back in place, put the base plate on. Normally, when you're working on these cameras, there is no mechanical fault present, and all the problems relate to stuff being gummed up with old dried grease and so forth. But not today. How would that cam get loose on the end of the shaft? Well, the answer to that's quite easy. Usually it's drop damage. Usually the camera's been thumped down on the base, and as a result the film advance lever has been knocked over to one side, effectively stressing that riveted over portion and making it loose. Right, that could have been disastrous. Well, that returns to the rest position beautifully, just like a textbook case of a good camera. That gear in place. This sort of fault is why I usually do not immediately pack up and send home cameras once I've serviced them. Usually I hold the camera for a couple of days afterwards, come back to it, give it a full test again to ensure that everything that was working is still working, because there should be no difference in behaviour. Before I pack them up and send them on their merry way. So the lever was slightly loose where it was riveted into place. When it was in one orientation of wiggle, it was jamming. When it was in the other orientation of wiggle, it was not jamming. But the difference between the two was quite slight. And I certainly couldn't see it. See if we can get this rack back in the right place. Probably not. I think I will take the shutter out first and put it back after I've got the film advance sorted. Get this rack positioned. And get the straps down. Intermittent faults can be the hardest things to track down. This one being difficult because the film advance lever didn't appear to be loose. The cam didn't appear to be loose on the end of the film advance shaft. And if you wiggled it in one direction, there was no movement to be found. It was good. It was only if you wiggled it in another orientation that you could see that there was movement there. Okay. Now, is there any wiggle on this film advance lever? No. And that's moving exactly as it should do now. And so I expect that that's it. Okay, now all I've got to do is reassemble everything and of course put the shutter back in the camera. Right, let's get the base plate back on because I've got all the screws from that loose here at the moment. So I'll put the top cover temporarily in place. And I can get the base plate back on, get the leatherettes back on, put the film advance lever back on, back catch cover, all that stuff. Then come back and complete at the top of the camera. And all should be good. And of course we know this camera had been dropped. There's 3 lots, that makes 3 lots of damage I've noticed on this camera from drop damage. I've replaced the chrome trim on the base plate here because the base plate had been thumped in at this corner, I think. The strap lug at the rewind end had been folded in from being dropped. And now we know that the film advance lever had taken a thump as well. Now one of those events is what did for the meter, I would say, because that certainly has all the hallmarks of drop damage. I'm a bit paranoid, I'm just checking to make sure that there's no problem with that film advance. I think it's done, I think that part's fixed. Okay, I will now take the lever back off and put my leatherettes in place. And there's probably no reason for you to watch any of this. I'll bring you back once I've got the camera fully assembled for the final time. Well, hopefully for the last time I've assembled this camera. But absolutely no problem with the film advance now, it's returning normally. Mind you, it has to be said that a few days ago it seemed to appeared to be returning normally at that point. So can I be confident that I've fixed the problem? I can be reasonably confident because I found something. I found something material. I found that the disc on the end of the film advance shaft was loose. It wasn't very loose, and it was only loose in one plane, not the other plane. It wasn't completely wobbly, which is what fooled me, because when I tested it earlier I obviously didn't wiggle it thoroughly enough to see if it would move in any direction, and it would move in one. But at the moment it certainly seems to be working very well. I will probably put this aside for a couple of days and make sure that it still works reliably before I send it off back to from whence it came, which in this case I think was the United States. Thanks for watching. It's a couple of hours later on the same day. And where did we leave this? Working perfectly. And what's it like now? Exactly the same. This one's going to drive me crazy. Okay. Back into it, I suppose. It didn't stay riveted, did it? Oh, I don't know, it's going to drive me crazy. Well, I've searched through my parts and I have one here that looks brand new, completely unmolested, and it looks to be identical. So, I don't think there's any question we'll be using the new one, because I've sort of run out of patience for dealing with this one here. I'm getting no wiggle at all in that direction. Yeah, certainly some there. Yeah. Never mind. I probably should have replaced it the first time around. That's what you get for being too smart. Back once it's back together again for the third or fourth time. That's working lovely. Mind you, it's worked lovely on 2 or 3 other occasions in the past. This better be the last time that I need to get into this camera. Otherwise I will just have to smash it completely with a big hammer and lie and tell my customer that the dog ate the homework. There you go.